Order. Dr. Al Pinkerton to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Madam Chairman. It's an honour to speak under your chairmanship today. I also want to extend my gratitude, if I may, to all the members who have taken the time, honourable and right honourable, to participate in today's debate. The presence of you here means so much, I know, to campaigners, to victims and to families of carbon monoxide poisoning, as well as to the charities and organisations who support them. I'd especially like to acknowledge my constituent, Cathy Foley, who first brought the issue of CO poisoning abroad to my attention during a surgery appointment in November last year. And it is with Cathy's story, the one that she shared with me in November, that I wish to open this debate, if I may. Hudson Foley, Cathy's son, was by every possible account a bright, enthusiastic and energetic young man. As with so many others his age, physical health and fitness were a pursuit, a pastime and a pleasure, as was the lure of international travel. In May 2023, Hudson set off from his family home in Surrey for an organised backpacking adventure across South America, where he planned to learn Spanish, volunteer, meet new people and explore the region. During his travels, Hudson stayed in homestay accommodation arranged by a well-known travel company specialising in youth travel. On the morning of Wednesday, October the 30th, 2023, he had breakfast, made a phone call back to the UK and shared light-hearted conversations with his host family before heading for his morning shower. Only minutes later, Hudson was found unresponsive in the bathroom. And despite the best efforts of his host family, Hudson could not be revived. He was just 24 years old when he died. The official cause of death was listed as acute pulmonary edema, a condition where excess fluid fills the lungs. However, the diagnosis made no sense to Cathy. Hudson was a healthy, active young man who neither smoked nor drank. Determined to uncover the truth of his death, Cathy reached out to the British Embassy in Quito to request a post-mortem report. The first difficulty Cathy faced was that obtaining the report required a formal request from a solicitor. After months of persistence and even flying to Ecuador herself, Cathy finally received the report, which included a toxicology analysis from a US-based specialist doctor who Cathy herself had to find to undertake this work. The results showed no alcohol presence, no drug presence, but one alarming detail stood out. The carbon monoxide levels in Hudson's blood exceeded 50%. Had it not been for Cathy's relentless determination, travelling to Ecuador, consulting a carbon monoxide specialist, securing legal assistance and hiring a translator, Hudson's death would have remained misdiagnosed and there would have been no inquest. In fact, Hudson was just days away from his case being filed away for good. Thanks to Cathy's tenacity, the true story behind Hudson's death is being heard today. One of the greatest challenges Cathy and campaign groups face in their advocacy for carbon monoxide awareness is the lack of accurate data on carbon monoxide-related deaths overseas. We know that fatalities have occurred over the last 25...
We shall resume in 15 minutes, but if subsequent votes occur, we shall allow an additional consecutive 10 minutes per vote. Thank you. Dr Al Pinkerton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As I was saying, one of the greatest challenges Cathy and campaign groups face in their advocacy for carbon monoxide awareness is the lack of accurate data on carbon monoxide-related deaths overseas. We know that fatalities have occurred over the last 25 years in the likes of Spain, Egypt, France and indeed Ecuador, with many more cases of travellers being hospitalised worldwide, yet the data remains fragmented and drastically under-records and underrepresents the true scale of carbon monoxide deaths. In many countries, post-mortem toxicology reports are not required, meaning carbon monoxide often goes undetected, unrecorded, and ultimately may be attributed to other generic pulmonary conditions, as happened with Hudson. The silent killer remains silent. The UK charity CO Gas Safety has recorded 34 deaths of British citizens overseas by carbon monoxide poisoning since 1999, but they stress that this is a vast under-recording. How many more have gone undocumented? Many families lack the resources or ability to do what Cathy did, leaving them without the truth that they deserve. It's crucial to understand that the dangers of carbon monoxide extend far beyond sudden fatal poisoning. Since taking up this cause, I have met survivors who suffer from the long-term health implications, including severe cognitive impairments affecting memory, language, mood and behaviour, all caused by prolonged CO exposure. The risk isn't limited to homestays like the one that Hudson was in when he died, nor is it confined to low-budget backpacker accommodation, as some might assume. In May 2022, 3 American tourists were found dead in their villas at the Sandals Resort in the Bahamas, all having perished from the effects of carbon monoxide. Let me be clear. This can happen to anyone, anywhere, at any age, whether in luxury hotels or backpacker hostels. Faults can develop even in well-maintained appliances, meaning all travellers, regardless of where they stay, should be well advised to take precautions. The most heart-wrenching reality of this particular tragedy is that it was entirely preventable. If only Hudson had been aware of the high levels of carbon monoxide in his homestay, if only he had carried a £20 portable carbon monoxide alarm. Since Hudson's death, Cathy and her family, who are here today, have dedicated herself and themselves to raising awareness of the risks of CO poisoning through Hudson's Pack Safe appeal, a campaign that encourages travellers, particularly young backpackers, to carry and use a carbon monoxide alarm. Working in collaboration with the Safer Tourism Foundation, Cathy's campaign pushes for greater responsibility across the travel industry, ensuring that all accommodation providers, from chain hotels to Airbnb hosts, pay attention to the issue of carbon monoxide safety. Hudson's Pack Safe appeal has already made significant progress in educating about these potential dangers. Through the sheer force of Cathy's character, and I can attest to that force, she has taken Hudson's message onto radio, onto television, and even into the matchday programme of Chelsea Football Club, the team Hudson had supported all his life. It would be fair to say that this debate would not be happening today if it hadn't been for that constituency surgery I had with Cathy last November. That conversation opened my eyes to the devastating effect that carbon monoxide poisoning can have. Although I had heard of this odourless, colourless gas before and was aware of the silent killer label, I had no understanding of CO's deadly consequences, not just for travellers like Hudson, but for people in homes here in the UK. This brings me to what I'm asking the government to do, on behalf of Hudson's family and all campaign groups I have been working with, many of whom are, as I say, here today. The root cause of these preventable deaths is that travellers are simply unaware that the accommodation they're staying in could pose a potential carbon monoxide risk. They don't even realise that this danger exists. While the risk of carbon monoxide is undoubtedly everywhere, even here in the UK, the education around its risk is not at the same level as, say, the risk of fire. And unlike fire, you can't see it, you can't smell it, you can't sense it, you wouldn't even know if you are suffering from it. That is the fundamental issue. Shockingly, even major travel companies, like the one Hudson used to organise his kit list for his trip to South America, were, and many still are, completely unaware of these risks. but there is a devastatingly simple way to put the risks of carbon monoxide poisoning onto the radar of the UK travel industry and into the minds and plans of British people travelling overseas. The UK travel sector closely monitors and indexes itself against the travel advice provided by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. From school trips abroad to travel companies, the travel industry uses information from gov.uk website and feeds it into their corporate and institutional risk assessments and travel guides. I know because I've done it myself when organising field trips and coursework overseas in the university sector. The FCDO has huge influence in the UK travel sector, even if it doesn't always realise it. And the risks faced by travellers are clearly reflected in the travel advice and kit lists that the FCDO provides. In correspondence with me on the 22nd of January, the Minister of State for International Development stated that the British Embassy in Quito recently reviewed carbon monoxide poisoning incidents in Ecuador and as a result determined not to update travel advice to add risks of carbon monoxide poisoning. Given the experience of Cathy in securing an accurate post-mortem assessment in Hudson's case, the reliability of the data on which this particular assessment was made is certainly open to question. Some may ask, why focus this debate on risks to travellers overseas? Well, the answer again is simple. Because carbon monoxide has no smell or taste, it isn't an obvious danger, so can happen anywhere in the world. Someone like Hudson, who only felt faint in the days leading up to his death, wouldn't necessarily have realised that he was in any imminent danger. While people instinctively flee when they see fire, the same instinctive response doesn't apply to carbon monoxide poisoning. Indeed. Thank you.
Congratulate him on securing this very important debate, which, as he said, is very important to Cathy and her family, some of whom have graced us with their presence this afternoon. Would he agree with me that while this was a tragic loss of a young man in his prime, if some good could yet come of it, so that other lives are saved by making better precautions, that perhaps some good might yet come for others of the family's tragic bereavement?
I thank the right honourable gentleman for his intervention. I completely agree, and I know, even though I don't speak for Cathy, I know that she would agree with that as well, because the change that is required is devastatingly simple. It is a minor change that we are looking for here. Just a few lines added to the government travel advice could have a life-saving impact of the kind that he mentions. The FCDO has a real opportunity here to influence the entire travel sector by identifying the risk of carbon monoxide on their travel advisory pages, from where it can cascade through the wider UK travel industry. And I have to confess, I'm not convinced that the FCDO fully appreciates, fully grasps the power or the influence that they have over that sector, or indeed the close attention that people pay to their travel advisory pages, individuals, but also the institution as a whole. Of course, advice can only go so far. If travellers are warned of the risks of carbon monoxide, it becomes their individual responsibility to pack a portable carbon monoxide alarm and then, crucially, to use it while travelling. And that's often a link that is broken. Today, we hope that the FCDO can see a way to using its power to reduce risk and possibly to prevent further tragic losses of British lives overseas. Hudson Foley's death was not an isolated incident, though Cathy's extraordinary determination has ensured that his story has been heard today. I urge the government to move beyond the mindset that more numerical evidence is needed before action is taken. We cannot, I would contend, afford to wait for more deaths before reacting. We must act now. Thank you.
Jim Shannon.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It is indeed a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I'm not sure if is this the Honourable Lady's first chair of the Westminster Hall. I'm not sure if it is or not, but if it is, I wish her well, and she'll have many more opportunities to chair and keep us all in place. And thank you for being here. Can I also, first of all, thank the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath for leading today's debate on this important issue. And He delivered what's a difficult story in a very compassionate way, which would be the man that I know, and I've only known him a short time in this House, on behalf of his constituents and to those who grieve today for one of their loved ones. I think we would convey, each of us would convey our deepest sympathy to them. And to lose a life, of course, when backpacking, whenever it's all fun and enjoyment, and suddenly to be confronted with a stark reality is quite inconceivable. There's nothing more valuable in life, and what an awful thing to happen abroad. So it is important, I believe, to put forward, as the Honourable Gentleman has put forward, some ideas of how to address the issue. And I know we've got a minister in place who always tries to respond in a positive way and give us all hope, and especially the Honourable Gentleman for Surrey Heath and for his constituents, for those here who are in the gallery today, and give them hope that out of this tragedy perhaps some good can come of what has happened. Many will know carbon monoxide is a silent killer due to being colourless and odourless. It is also known across the USA and Europe as the lead cause of fatal poisonings. Whilst up-to-date figures are not available between July 2010 and June 2011, Northern Ireland in that period of time suffered 7 deaths and 4 casualties of CO poisoning. Furthermore, Northern Ireland has been identified as having the highest rate of fatalities from CO poisoning in the UK. Again, the Honourable Gentleman is looking overseas, but when we reflect back home, I think it gives us an idea of how prevalent the poisoning is. It highlights a massive need for greater integration between this government and the Northern Ireland Assembly. Ever mindful that isn't the Minister's responsibility, but perhaps if he can, through his civil servants, give us some idea that there's some discussions that will be ongoing. Ever mindful that we have the highest figures in the UK, of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. The FCDO does provide guidance on support for British nationals living abroad or going abroad, outlining the type of help it can provide and offering general advice on staying safe overseas. Whenever you set out on that fun journey, that trip overseas, that trip of a lifetime perhaps maybe for many, it is important to have up-to-date travel advice and warnings for specific countries. The Honourable Gentleman has outlined those issues, and I think he's done it very, very well for all of us here. The issue being, of course, Madam Chair, that only the UK has guidance for our own country, meaning at some destinations there is no legal requirement for detectors in some hostels and Airbnbs when people go abroad, and I think we should be pushing for that. And the Honourable Gentleman is very forcibly pushed that forward as what he would expect, and I think probably honestly what we would all expect out of this debate today. Furthermore, it is crucial that people are aware of the first signs of carbon monoxide exposure are not aware of the first signs due to it being so hard to detect. Exposure to small amounts of carbon monoxide for a long time may not necessarily be fatal. They can give like flu-like symptoms, tiredness, headaches, memory problems, or loss of vision. Conveniently, it can be difficult to compare, as these symptoms can be common alongside other day-to-day illnesses. So you may not always be under, or you may not be under an illusion that it's not as bad as it was, or as bad as it could be. But hence the importance of a detector. The UK charity CO Gas Safety has recorded deaths of 34 UK citizens. Others I think referred to that as well. Although they do say that they figure that the number could be even larger than that, and that is worrying if it's just scraping at the surface. Currently, only 2 of the government's country-to-countries, that's China and Nepal, travel safety information pages addresses carbon monoxide poisoning. The fact that they do maybe might indicate, of course, that these are 2 of the ones where when you go in that journey and holiday of a lifetime, those are 2 places. Well, I hardly be going to China, but that's by the way. But Nepal would be one of those countries perhaps you might go to, despite it posing a massive universal risk to people of all ages. The most recent travel advises highly advocates for British travellers to carry a mobile carbon monoxide alarm whilst travelling. You're going to say to yourself, my goodness, how much can we carry? Well, it's light, it's small, and it doesn't really take up much room, but it could save your life, and that's what it's all about. In addition, Madam Chair, standards for the design and manufacture of combustion appliances can be far lower outside Europe. So appliances used in makeshift holiday lets can be old and installed in rooms ill-suited to their use. So travellers should be aware of the risks and take precautions to protect themselves. And it's not a criticism of the places that you stay, because, to be honest with you, Madam Chair, when I've been abroad, I've probably stayed in really bad places. But it didn't really bother me, because ultimately I wasn't worried. They were probably cheap, and that was the reason why I was there, you know. But that's when I was younger, and whenever you were much healthier as well. It's a small price to pay to protect life, but I believe government must do more to persuade other countries to be compliant and protect their people. When we look at the figures that 95% of households across the UK have smoke alarms, why do only 4% have monoxide alarms when the potential dangers are just as fatal? So there is some things for us to do at home as well. I believe we can't ignore that. There's more work to be done, not only abroad but domestically, also to protect our people, which we have a duty here to do. I look to government and to the Minister for directions and plans to raise more awareness, to have a strategy, a plan of action that we can point to as a result, hopefully, of this debate today. The stories we've heard of those lost lives are awful, and our international counterparts, along with our own government, I believe, have a role to play to ensure safety for those travelling. So I look forward to what the Minister says and the hope that he will give us, that we can do more to protect people in the future. And to the honourable gentleman who set the scene, well done.
Edward Morello.
Thank you, Dr. Alan Carnan. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I'd like to begin by thanking my honourable friend, the member for Surrey Heath, for securing this vital debate and for the powerful and deeply moving speech that he has made. The story of Hudson Foley, a young man with his whole life ahead of him, tragically lost due to carbon monoxide poisoning while travelling, is one that should never have to be told. And yet, tragically, Hudson's story is not an isolated case. There have been too many lives lost, too many families shattered, and a government response that is sadly inadequate. As we've discussed, carbon monoxide is an invisible killer. It is odourless, colourless, and impossible to detect without proper equipment. It is produced when fuels such as gas, oil, paraffin, charcoal, wood don't burn properly, and that makes it a hidden danger in many settings. Homes, hotels, holiday rentals are all susceptible. Without adequate warning, education and safety measures, travellers are left vulnerable to the risks that they do not even know exist. And as we've heard, the statistics are sobering. There have been 28,900 deaths worldwide in 2021 alone. This is not an issue that affects only one country or one demographic. It is a global problem, and it demands urgent action. The heartbreaking reality is that these are deaths that are preventable. My honourable friend rightly makes the point that portable carbon monoxide alarms can dramatically reduce the risk, yet far too few travellers are aware of their importance. The Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office has a clear and pressing duty to act, not just to protect British travellers, but also their loved ones. It is failing to provide strong, explicit warnings about the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning in its travel advice, and that needs addressing. British travellers trust FCDO guidance. It is widely used by individuals, families and travel industry itself, and yet nowhere does it mention the very real risk of carbon monoxide poisoning. This must change. The Liberal Democrats call on the government to take the following steps immediately. Update country-specific travel advice to include warnings about carbon monoxide poisoning risks. Amend the guidance and foreign travel checklist pages to provide clear advice on CO safety. Actively encourage travellers to carry portable carbon monoxide alarms and launch a public information campaign to ensure that travellers are aware of the risks and how to protect themselves. These are incredibly simple, easily achievable measures that would save lives. The loss of life we have heard about today is not due to chance. It is a result of a failure to prioritise public health and safety. Under the last Conservative government, the public health grant was cut by 26%, undermining crucial initiatives that could have helped prevent these tragedies. Let us be clear. Every death from carbon monoxide poisoning is one too many. We have the tools to stop this from happening, and the government should act. The case of Hudson Foley highlights just how devastating inaction can be. And I must praise the dedication of his family. It was only because of their persistence that his cause of death was confirmed, something that would have otherwise gone unnoticed, as many countries do not require a post-mortem toxicology report for suspected CO poisoning. I hope the government will recognise that an appropriate tribute to his life and to the hard work of his family would be to adopt our proposals and prevent future deaths from happening. And we should not just stop at protecting travellers. We also need urgent action to ensure that people are safe in their own homes. The Honourable Member has highlighted cases in Northern Ireland. The recent tragedy in Swanage, Dorset, where 3 elderly people lost their lives, likely due to CO poisoning, has exposed serious gaps in our domestic regulations. Unlike in Scotland, care homes in England are exempt from CO alarm regulations. This is an appalling oversight. Vulnerable residents deserve protection, and the Liberal Democrats call on the government to close this loophole immediately. This issue also highlights broader failures in public health policy. The Liberal Democrats have long campaigned for an increase in the public health grant, ensuring that funding is allocated to address the worst health inequalities, including those linked to CO exposure. And we should also push for greater awareness in travel literature, as outlined by my colleague, urging travel agencies and tour operators to include carbon monoxide safety advice as standard practice. Finally, Chair, I want to pay tribute to Cathy Foley, Hudson's mother, and the incredible work she has done through Hudson's Pack Safe appeal. Her campaign, in partnership with the Safer Tourism Foundation, has documented cases of carbon monoxide poisoning deaths across a wide range of accommodations worldwide, from major hotel chains to short-term rentals like Airbnb. Cathy's advocacy, alongside the cross-party support of the APPG carbon monoxide group, demonstrates just how much change is needed. I am deeply grateful to Cathy and her family for their work, and for being here today to share their story, one that no parent should ever have to tell. Chair, I do not think this should be a political issue. The Lancet has described carbon monoxide poisoning as an almost entirely preventable cause of death. So there can be no justification for continued inaction. We owe it to Hudson and to his family, and to all of those who have lost loved ones to this silent killer. By making these simple, practical changes, we can save lives. And I ask this government to seize the opportunity to do so. Thank you.
Andrew Rossendale.
Thank you, Dr. Alan Khan, for calling me to respond on behalf of His Majesty's opposition. And may I say what a pleasure it is to serve under your chair for the first time. And to say to the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath, I commend him immensely for raising this issue on the floor of the House today. It's one of these issues that most MPs never hear about, never think about. The public don't know about this issue. And I think the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath has done us all a huge service today by raising this topic and by allowing us to hear about the facts of what has happened in this tragic case of Hudson, who died in 2023 at the age of only 24 in Ecuador, and how this could happen to anybody. This is not just something that has happened once. It can happen over and over again, and we do need cross-party action to deal with this. And I know that the Minister today will be taking on board all of the points that honourable members have made to ensure that we don't close this debate down and then move on to other issues, that in fact we take this forward and make the necessary changes to protect the safety of British travellers abroad, but also, as the honourable member for Dorset West mentioned, the risks domestically here in the United Kingdom, that the risks are here too, that there's a large number of people also die of carbon monoxide poisoning here in the UK, unbeknown to most people that it could happen. It's triggered something in my mind. I think I've had constituents actually in the past, many years ago, that died of a similar situation, and probably it happens more often than we realise. So action is needed, and today I hope, Minister, will trigger action from the government to ensure that Hudson's tragic death is not in vain, that others will live because of what happened to him, and that we will learn the lessons from that tragedy. So I again commend the member for Surrey Heath for raising this issue today, and also to thank other honourable members who've made powerful contributions. My honourable friend for Rayleigh and Wickford, it was a pleasure visiting his constituency only last Friday, and the honourable member for Strangford, who spoke powerfully about the effects in Northern Ireland, and as I've already mentioned, the member for West Dorset, I think there is cross-party consensus, I feel, in the room today that action is needed. And I thank Hudson's family and friends who've come today, and you know, with our heartfelt sympathy for this tragic loss. And we really hope that today will be the start of a serious change that will save lives in the future. So thank you, Dr. Alan Khan. If I could just make some formal remarks now on behalf of His Majesty's opposition. We know that carbon monoxide poisoning is often misdiagnosed, or worse, not diagnosed at all. So the amount of deaths from this awful occurrence could be far greater than we actually know. Many deaths abroad, they don't even appear on national or international statistics, so we don't actually know for sure how many people die of this awful situation. Most post-mortem tests are simply not fully conducted or conducted at all. So I say to the Minister, does the government have any estimate of how many Britons have actually died from carbon monoxide poisoning overseas in recent years? Are there statistics available? If so, why not? Perhaps he could tell us that in his closing remarks. According to the All-Party Parliamentary Group for Carbon Monoxide, 40 people die and thousands are injured every year in the UK from carbon monoxide poisoning. If this is happening in this country with relatively strong gas safety regulations, will the Minister tell us what about the risks to domestic people living in our own country as well as holidaymakers and those staying in properties with unknown safety standards abroad? And I think that certainly applied in the case of Hudson in a homestay, which I would imagine there's far greater risks in homestays than there are in staying in hotel accommodation. And we've heard from a member from Surrey, he thought £20 you can get this device. Now, I travel a lot and I don't have one of these. I'm going to get one now because it can affect anybody. And for £20 to actually be able to know if the place you're residing in is actually safe, I think that's worth the investment of £20. And I think we need all travellers to take this very sound advice. So, has the government evaluated how the risks compare for British people travelling to countries with different safety standards? Because they're not all the same all over the world. And I'm sure that Ecuador is an example of that. Having been to Quito myself, it's a very different part of the world and standards do differ. So it's important that people understand when they go to these faraway destinations that the risks are prevalent and we need to make them aware of those before they travel. And so will the Minister look at this and let us know what his findings are? Travellers booking through travel agencies may receive safety information, but those arranging trips independently won't necessarily do so. So, what more can the government do to ensure that all British travellers, regardless of how they book their accommodation, are aware of the risks involved? The FCDO's travel advice is widely used and trusted. Would it not be logical to expand the inclusion of advice on carbon monoxide poisoning to all destinations with inadequate gas safety regulations, rather than on a handful of countries where tragic deaths have occurred? Portable carbon monoxide alarms, as already mentioned, are inexpensive, easy to pack and widely recommended by the experts. So surely the government should be encouraging their use in the same way it promotes other basic travel safety measures. We have seen how determined campaigners, including today Cathy Foley and her family, through Hudson's Pack Safe Appeal, are working to raise awareness of this. I think this needs to be stated very clearly by the government, and I think the work that is being done now to promote this serious risk is something the government should move on very quickly. The Safer Tourism Foundation and the APPG have made constructive recommendations to improve public understanding. So how is the government working with these organisations to strengthen its approach, and what discussions have the government had with travel industry representatives, including airlines, tour operators and accommodation providers, to explore ways of improving safety messaging for holidaymakers across the world? This is not about creating unnecessary alarm. It is about ensuring that British travellers have the knowledge they need to make informed decisions about their safety. We already provide advice on issues ranging from food hygiene to local crime risks. So, isn't it sensible to have the same kind of advice for treating the potential for carbon monoxide poisoning and use it in the same way, that use it the same level of seriousness as we do with other possible risks to travellers abroad? This is a conversation about simple, practical steps that could and will, I believe, save lives. So I hope the Minister will take the opportunity to outline what action the government will take to help keep British travellers safe. I again thank the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath and all members that have contributed to this debate. I particularly thank Hudson's family. Let it be the case that we leave today in the knowledge that this debate has changed history, that actually from now on the British people will know, and the government will advise them, that they must take the adequate precautions which could potentially save the lives of themselves and their loved ones. Thank you.
Yeah.
And Hamish Faulkner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. I'm grateful to the Honourable Member for Surrey Heath for securing this debate. I send my condolences to Cathy and to the whole family for the tragic loss of Hudson in Ecuador. I know how difficult this must be, and my thoughts are with you. I'm grateful for the contributions of other honourable members, and I'll try to respond to the points raised. I know some of those contributions are informed by personal, painful experience as well. I'm the Minister with consular responsibilities for British nationals overseas, so I hope honourable members will forgive me if my speech focuses on the overseas elements, but we have taken careful note of the points made for other departments, including the Northern Ireland Office, the Department for Health, and of course the Department for Communities and Local Government, and my officials will seek answers for you on those more detailed questions, which I'm afraid I'm unable to answer today. Supporting British nationals abroad is clearly a key priority for the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office. Most British people live or travel abroad without incident or needing to seek consular assistance. When an incident does occur, they naturally and understandably ask whether it was preventable. And if it wasn't preventable, then what might have made it more bearable? So let me say a few words on how the government is acting to help British nationals in need abroad. I'll begin by setting out our approach to travel advice, the goal of which is to help make British nationals make better informed decisions about international travel. Their safety is always our top priority, and our advice is based on objective assessments of the risks, based on inputs from multiple sources. That includes our own embassies, foreign governments, and, where relevant, intelligence services. With regard to carbon monoxide poisoning specifically, as the House will be aware, building, fire and gas safety standards abroad do not always match those in the UK, as the member for Romford has identified. Since the Foreign Office lacks in-house expertise on building safety, we share information from expert organisations like Energy UK in some of our travel advice. As the member for Strangford identified, for some countries, like China and Nepal, where carbon monoxide poisoning is a higher risk, we include specific information on this in our travel advice, based on local reports and consular case trends. And I recognise the questions asked by me of the member for Romford about trends. It is difficult on the basis of information available to the Foreign Office. Last year, sadly, 4,000 British nationals lost their lives overseas. We believe at least 2 of those were a consequence of carbon monoxide poisoning. But as many of the speakers have identified, we cannot be sure of what we don't know. Wherever cases are raised, as is the case, sadly, in the tragic case that the member for Surrey Heath raises, my officials and myself are available if there is uncertainty about the cause of death and further support is required from the Foreign Office, we stand available to provide that. But as I think the member for Surrey Heath identified, ultimately our advice is there to guide people, not set rules which people must abide by. It's intended as just one source of information to help British people make informed decisions about where and how they travel, and I acknowledge what the member for Surrey Heath says about the impact that our advice has. I assure the House that we always consider the arguments for changes to travel advice on their merits. We must make judgments, try and consider all risks proportionately, and consider the best way to ensure advice is presented to travellers.
I'm grateful. On the point about extent of guidance, with my recent gas bill, I got a leaflet from British Gas, which I take to be authoritative, warning about the dangers of carbon monoxide poisoning, and they estimated about 50 people had died in the UK in the previous year from this, so slightly higher than the APPG, but similar to it. So they're warning people here in the UK, given what has happened, it wouldn't be a great deal of skin off the minister's nose if we were able to say that they will make it a standard part of travel advice for Brits going abroad to include this. Could I invite him with the family here to do the right thing?
Thank you, Chair. So I think the proposal is that we include the risks of carbon monoxide everywhere in the world. I'm happy to take away these proposals and come back with a more detailed answer, particularly in relation to the letter from the member of Surrey Heath, which, and indeed in his speech, where he set out some further requests of the Foreign Office. The balance with travel advice is always a desire not to have too much standard text across all countries and to try and keep it as focused as possible, but I'm happy to take away that question and return to it. Alongside travel advice, of course, the government aims to reduce incidents through our long-standing Travel Aware campaign. This includes key messages such as encouraging British nationals to have appropriate travel insurance, read our travel advice and sign up for our alerts. We partner with over 100 organisations from across the travel industry. That includes airlines, tour operators, insurance providers, and we ask them to help amplify our key messages and drive customers to our travel advice pages. We try to regularly review our work with partners to ensure they highlight appropriate issues to British travellers. Two of our partners, the Royal Society for the Prevention of Accidents and the Safer Tourism Foundation, that I think the Honourable Member has raised already, raise awareness specifically on the risks of carbon monoxide poisoning around the world. And I commit that my officials will hold another meeting with Safer Tourism Foundation later this month to explore opportunities for greater collaboration. Turning now to our work on prevention, we use a range of sources, customer feedback, casework data and in-house research to determine when to take preventative action. We also work closely with host authorities, partners in the travel industries and others to improve local support for British people abroad. Through our Student Brand Ambassador programme, we aim to raise awareness amongst young people about preventable incidents. Let me assure the House that the Government is committed to continual improvement. We are looking for ways to improve our consular services, including the prevention activity, our messaging and our travel advice. Priority themes are constantly under review, with decisions being made according to what poses the greatest risk to British travellers abroad. We will also explore options for linking to other expert sources through our solo and independent travel advice pages. This includes advice such as that shared by Safer Tourism on carbon monoxide safety. I admire the efforts of the Foley family to urge travellers to take safety equipment such as carbon monoxide detectors on their travels. We will consider including this in our advice, and it's of course important that travellers use them in accordance with manufacturers' instructions and that they should be maintained and tested regularly. I want to emphasise that we welcome all feedback and use it to improve our services. I recognise the strength of feeling from the House and from the Honourable Member. We'll consider the proposals he's made carefully, and I'm happy to meet with colleagues again to follow up on these important issues. And in the spirit that the member for Romford made in his speech, we would intend to work on this on a cross-party basis. I'd like to reiterate the Foreign Office's commitment to providing clear, accessible and up-to-date travel advice. We will keep it under constant review, ensure it reflects the latest assessments, and we will continue collaborating with the travel industry to amplify personal safety messages and indeed work with host governments to reduce the risks for British people abroad.
Dr Al Pinkerton to wind up.
Madam Chairman, and I would just like to take this opportunity to extend my thanks again to everybody, to my honourable and right honourable friends and colleagues who have come here today and who have spoken so passionately and so supportively and indeed constructively on this topic. I think we all recognise that what is being asked for here is really a comparatively small change, the additional of some extra lines on some web pages, but also recognising that those extra lines can have potentially a transformative effect because of the power of the FCDO website in setting a tone amongst the tourism organisations in the UK and the wider travel and tourism sector here. The way that risk assessments and other institutional documentation is indexed against the travel advisory provided by the FCDO. Such a small change could have a transformative effect, and an explicit recommendation to carry an incredibly cheap, an incredibly portable and hugely effective CO alarm could genuinely save lives in the future. As I say, I'm hugely grateful to everybody who has been here today, and one final time may I just take the opportunity to pay tribute to Cathy Foley and her family, along with representatives of charities and organisations who have supported her and who bring awareness for all of us to the issue of carbon monoxide poisoning, who have been here today. I'm hugely grateful to you all. And thank you very much to the Minister for making those commitments to look again at that travel advice. I'm encouraged to hear about the forthcoming meeting with Safer Tourism, and I'd be very happy to be part of any future discussions that you may have. Thank you.
The question is that this House has considered government advice on risks of carbon monoxide poisoning when travelling. As many as are of that opinion say aye. Of the contrary, no. I think the ayes have it. Order, order. We shall resume at 4 o'clock.